The moving estimate said 3,040 miles, door to door. I had that number memorized before I had a forwarding address. It was 11 at night, and the bedroom was empty. Mattress on the floor, boxes stacked in the hallway, the street outside, doing what it always did. My phone buzzed on the windowsill, and I picked it up. The group text had been running for 2 hours. My mother had sent 14 messages. I counted them. 14 messages about what would fall apart the moment I was gone. Dad's prescriptions, the property manager, the thing with Marcus at school that had apparently been unresolved since March, Thanksgiving, Christmas, a water stain on the ceiling of the upstairs bathroom that had nothing to do with me leaving but was in the text chain anyway. I put the phone back down face down and stood there. 14 messages. 2 hours. Not one of them said, "Don't go." Not one of them said, "We'll miss you." Every single one was a problem with my name on it, forwarded to me like a ticket to a help desk that was about to close. I had been that help desk for 10 years. I had told myself it was just how family worked, that being needed and being loved were more or less the same thing. I had believed it long enough that I had stopped asking whether any of it was actually true. The truck was coming at 7, 3,040 miles. I was about to find out. My name is Joel. I was 41, living 20 minutes from the house I grew up in, and on a normal Saturday, my phone started going off before 9 in the morning. My mother called first. There was a letter from her insurance company, and she needed me to explain it. I asked if it could wait until the weekend. I had things I was trying to get done. There was a pause, and then she said she just didn't understand what they were asking her to do, and she didn't want to make a mistake. The injury in her voice was slight but exact. I told her I'd come over. By the time I said it, the injury was gone. She said she'd put coffee on. My sister texted while I was driving. Her landlord was giving her trouble about the lease renewal, and she needed someone to talk to him because she said he didn't take her seriously. My older brother called while I was at my mother's kitchen table going through the letter line by line. Dad's prescription was ready at the pharmacy, and their father was refusing to go himself, for reasons my brother didn't explain and I didn't ask about. I left my mother's and drove to the pharmacy. Then I sat in the parking lot on the phone with my sister's landlord for 50 minutes while he explained, slowly, the terms of a lease I had not signed and had no legal standing over. He adjusted one clause. My sister texted back, said that was great, thanks. I got home a little after 9. I opened the fridge, looked at it, and closed it again. I sat on the couch in the dark for a few minutes before I could make myself get up. At some point that night, I opened my laptop. There was a job listing I had been looking at for 2 weeks, senior operations role, West Coast, a city I had been to exactly once for a conference in 2019. The kind of job I would have been right for 5 years ago if I had been looking. I finished the application and submitted it at 1 in the morning. I told myself I was doing it to see what would happen. That was probably not entirely true. 2 weeks later, they called. I had turned down a job in another city at 26 because my mother had a hospital scare that turned out to be nothing. A stress response, the doctor said. She was home in 2 days. I had already called to decline the offer by then. At 30, I was in a relationship that ended, in part, because my sister had decided she couldn't handle me being away on weekends. Not every weekend. Some weekends. The woman I was with stopped seeing a future in it. I didn't have a good argument to make. The graduate program I was admitted to at 34, I never enrolled in. My father had a fall of the month before classes started. He was bruised, not broken, walking normally within a week. I had already deferred, and when the deferral window closed, I didn't reapply. Each of those things, standing alone, had felt like the reasonable response to a real situation. I had never looked at them together. I started writing them down the week after I submitted the job application, just a list, dates and events in a single column. And what I saw in that column was not a series of isolated emergencies. It was a pattern with a rhythm. The worst of the crises, the ones with the most urgency and the most injury in people's voices, had almost always arrived within 2 weeks of me mentioning something that would have taken me further away. Not every time, but enough times that once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. I got the offer on a Wednesday. I didn't tell anyone for 9 days. I needed to know I was actually going before I said it out loud to people who would work to make sure I didn't. On the 10th day, I told them at Sunday dinner. My mother, Neil, my older brother, mid-40s, married, the kind of eldest son who had always governed from a comfortable distance, my sister and my father. I said it plainly. Senior role, West Coast, good company, I'd accepted. I told them the start date. My mother set her fork down. My sister's eyes went wet almost immediately. My father looked at his plate. Neil was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll figure out, I guess." He said it like a man who had just been handed a box and hadn't decided yet whether he was going to carry it. In the 6 weeks between that dinner and the move, I tried to do what I had always done, make it easier for everyone else. I spent 2 evenings writing a document I thought of privately as the handoff manual. Every recurring task I handled for the family. The insurance company contact for my mother's policy and the specific extension that actually answered. My father's pharmacy number and the refill schedule. The name of my sister's property manager and the notes from every conversation I'd had with him. Account logins, utility contacts, the name of the plumber my parents had used for 15 years. I organized it clearly, sent it to Neil and my sister, and told them it had everything they'd need. Neither of them replied. The week before the move, my mother started mentioning physical things. A pain in her side that came and went. Dizziness some mornings. Trouble getting to sleep. She said more than once that she wanted to get it looked at before I left, just in case. I drove her to 2 appointments in 5 days. Both came back clean. She thanked the doctors politely and told me afterward that they always miss things. She said it without accusation, like it was a known fact about the medical profession. 3 days before the move, my sister called at midnight. She and her partner had fought badly, and she was sitting in her car in the parking lot of a gas station, and she didn't know what to do. I stayed on the phone with her for 2 hours. We talked through the relationship, the pattern, what she wanted, what she was afraid of. By the end, she had calmed down, and she thanked me and said she didn't know what she was going to do when I wasn't there anymore. I told her she'd do exactly what she'd just done, work through it, just with someone else on the other end of the line. She went quiet. Then she said she had to go and hung up. I put the phone down and looked at the boxes stacked against the wall. 3 days. My father almost never called. He was not that kind of man. He communicated through proximity, through sitting in the same room, through handing you something without explanation. So when his name came up on my phone the morning before the flight, I picked up on the first ring. His voice was low, like he didn't want to be overheard. He said Lorraine had been very upset, said she'd been crying in the kitchen and that she was worried. His word, worried, about being abandoned when she was old. He said he wasn't asking me not to go. He just wanted me to consider whether the timing was right. He said it like it was his own thought. It didn't sound like his own thought. I thanked him for calling. I told him I'd talk to him soon. I didn't change my flight. That evening, Neil sent a text that took a full minute to scroll through. He wasn't asking me to stay. He was smarter than that. What he was doing was listing, in careful and specific detail, every task that would now fall to him and asking, in a tone of quiet injury, whether I had thought about what that would mean for his marriage and his kids. I read it twice. I noticed that the document I had sent 6 weeks earlier, the one neither of them had acknowledged, would have answered most of what he was describing. I typed one line back. The document I sent on the 14th covers all of this. Let me know what's still unclear. He didn't reply that night. The next morning, my sister came to the airport. She hugged me hard and held on for a moment, and then she stepped back and told me she was proud of me. She said it in the careful tone of someone who had practiced it, like she'd decided on the drive over that it was the right thing to say. I told her I'd call when I landed. Neil texted safe flight at some point during boarding. My father didn't text. My mother didn't come. I found my seat, put my bag overhead, and sat down. Somewhere over the Midwest, I fell asleep. When I woke up, we were beginning our descent, and the sky outside the window was a different color than any sky I'd seen in years. Cleaner, somehow. Further. 3 weeks in, my phone lit up at 4 in the morning on Saturday. My sister had texted a photo of the cabinet under her kitchen sink, water pooling at the base of the pipe, a slow drip coming from the joint. She asked what she should do. I typed back from bed. Turn off the shutoff valve, the one just below the pipe. Call a plumber in the morning. Here are 3 numbers I found in 30 seconds on my phone. She thanked me and said she didn't know what she would have done. I put the phone down. It was 5:30 before I slept again, and the sleep wasn't good. The following week, my mother called at 2 in the morning, my time. She was crying in the shallow, rapid way that meant she'd been crying for a while before she dialed. She said she was having chest pains. She said she didn't want to go to the hospital alone. She said she was afraid. I told her I was right there. I kept my voice level. I asked her to describe what she was feeling, where exactly, how long it had been going on. She answered between breaths. After a few minutes, the sobbing slowed slightly, not because anything had changed, but because there was a voice on the line. I told her I was going to call Neil and have him take her in, and that I would stay on the phone the whole time. The breathing shortened when I said Neil's name. Then I said I wasn't going anywhere, I'd be on the line the whole time, and it lengthened again. I called Neil on a second phone. He was groggy and then annoyed, and then, to his credit, he went. I stayed on with my mother until she was in his car. She didn't need me to after that. By the time I heard back, the sun was coming up on the East Coast. She had been seen, examined, and sent home. No cardiac event. The ER notes, which Neil read to me in a flat voice, said anxiety. She had not been having chest pains. I sat at my kitchen counter with a coffee I didn't remember making and looked at the wall. I had been in this city for less than a month, and I had been awake in the dark multiple times handling things that were happening 3,000 miles away. The distance wasn't working the way distance was supposed to work. I had moved my body across the country and left everything else exactly where it was. I sat there and thought for the first time without flinching from it that I was going to have to stop answering some of these calls. Not all of them. Some of them. I didn't know yet which ones or how to know the difference. And I didn't know yet whether I had it in me to be the person who lets the phone ring and doesn't move. I called my manager when the hour was reasonable and asked for the following Friday off. She said of course and asked if everything was all right. I told her yes. I made a rule, not out loud, not announced to anyone, just a decision I made on a Friday evening and wrote down in a notes app so I could see it clearly. Non-emergencies would go to Neil or my sister. Their time zone, normal hours, their problem to route. My phone went on Do Not Disturb at 10 p.m. local time and stayed that way until 7 in the morning. I set a separate ringtone for my father, a plain tone that would cut through any setting, because in 41 years my father had never once called me about something he didn't actually need. Everyone else went through normal channels and waited. The first 2 weeks were loud, in the way that things get loud when a system stops running the way it was built to run. My mother sent a long email. The word abandoned appeared twice. My sister sent a string of voice notes across 3 days about a situation at work that had nothing to do with me and nothing in it I could have changed from any distance. Neil sent a text that said I was checking out. I read all of it. I replied to none of it in real time. On Saturday afternoon, I sat down and replied to everything, briefly and calmly, in the order it had arrived. Practical things got practical answers. Everything else got a short, even response that didn't apologize and didn't explain. The world did not end. At the end of the second week, my father called on the separate ringtone. I picked up before the second ring. He said he'd been thinking. He said the family had been managing fine and that I should know that. He said Lorraine had been complaining less, and that the reason she'd been complaining less was that it hadn't been working. He said it without judgment, just as a fact he had observed. Then he said he was proud of me. I didn't say anything for a moment. He had never said that before, not once in any form unprompted in my adult life. The call lasted 4 minutes. We talked about his knee, which had been bothering him, and about a neighbor's tree that had come down in storm. Then we said goodbye and hung up. I sat on the couch for a long time after. The call was Lorraine's idea. 6 months in, she sent a message to the group text, just to catch up, all of us together, Sunday evening. I joined from my apartment in the late afternoon, The city outside my window still bright, everyone else already settling into their evenings on the East Coast. Lorraine had her good cardigan on. Neil had his kids in the background. My sister was at her kitchen table with a mug. My father was in his chair, the same chair he'd been in for 30 years. Lorraine moved through the small talk efficiently, and then said she wanted everyone to share an update. She started with Neil. Neil said things were fine, busy with work, the usual. Then he mentioned, almost in passing, that he'd gotten the pharmacy situation sorted, had the refill schedule on his phone now, said it was actually not that bad once he had the routine. He laughed a little when he said it. I looked at him on the screen and said nothing. My sister went next. She said she was doing well. Better, actually. She'd sorted things out with her landlord, handled it herself, a conversation and a letter done in a week. She mentioned, as an aside, that she'd started therapy 2 months ago and that it had helped more than she expected. She said it like it was a small thing. She looked lighter than she had in years. My mother said she'd been keeping busy. No new complaints. No new symptoms she needed to describe. My father, sitting beside her, said he'd been driving her to her appointments and that it worked out fine because it got him out of the house. Lorraine pressed her lips together slightly at that, but said nothing. When it came to me, I said I was good, settling in, glad to hear how everyone was doing. And then I said I wanted to say one thing, and I'd say it once. I told them I loved them. I told them I wasn't going anywhere, not from the family, not from their lives. And then I said that the version of me that had handled everything for 15 years had been giving them a story about themselves that wasn't true, that they were more capable than that story allowed, that I had kept showing up in a way that made it easy not to find that out. I said it without heat. I said it the way you say something you've been carrying for a long time and have finally put down somewhere solid. Lorraine opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Neil nodded, slowly, the way he had at the dinner table 6 months earlier, but slower this time and with less resignation in it. My father said, quietly, "He's right." My sister looked at the camera and said, "I know." The call went on for another 20 minutes. We talked about Neil's kids, about a trip my parents were thinking about taking, about nothing in particular. Lorraine did not bring up the thing I'd said. Nobody needed me to walk anything back. The days after the call were quiet in a way the family had never been quiet before. Lorraine didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't forward anything to the group thread. My sister sent a voice note 2 days later. It was long, nearly 8 minutes, and it wound around itself the way she talked when she was being careful. But somewhere in the middle of it, she said that she'd known, for a while, that something wasn't right about the way things had been set up, and that she hadn't had the words for it until I'd said it out loud. She thanked me in her own way, which meant she thanked me twice and then made a small joke to soften it. I listened to the whole thing. Neil texted the morning after that. One line, "You weren't wrong. Doesn't mean it didn't sting." I sat with that for a moment. Then I wrote back, "I know. Thank you for picking it up." He didn't reply, but he didn't need to. Lorraine called the following week. Her voice had the particular stiffness of someone who had decided before dialing exactly what they were and weren't going to say. She told me she'd been thinking about what I'd said on the call. She didn't use the word sorry. She told me she was proud of the job, that it sounded like a good opportunity, that she hoped I was settling in well. She asked if I was eating properly. I told her yes. The call lasted 11 minutes. She didn't ask me to do anything. She didn't mention a problem. She didn't forward a letter or describe a symptom or bring up a situation that needed handling. She just talked to me, stiffly and carefully, like a woman learning a new way to use a thing she'd had her whole life. I noticed. I didn't say anything about it. My father called a few days later on the separate ringtone. He asked about the weather. He asked how the job was going. Then he mentioned quietly that my sister had come over for dinner the night before, and that Neil had brought the kids, and that the house had felt like a house. That was exactly what he said. Felt like a house. I told him I was glad. I meant it without qualification. We said goodbye, and I sat at the kitchen table after, the phone face down in front of me, watching the afternoon light move across the wall. A year out, I had a life that fit, a job I was good at, a small circle of people I liked, a city I had chosen without asking anyone's permission. I flew back east twice, once in the spring, once in November. Long weekends both times. The visits were warm. They were also finite. I flew home on the day I said I'd fly home. No one asked me to stay longer. Neil called one Sunday afternoon in the fall. Not because anything was wrong. He said he'd just been thinking and wanted to talk. He told me he'd been handling the medical appointments for over a year, that he and Lorraine had found a rhythm, that they were actually getting along better than they ever had. He said he understood now why I'd left when I did. He said it plainly, without resentment, like a man reporting something he'd arrived at slowly and was no longer surprised by. I thanked him. We talked for an hour about his kids, about a trip he was planning, about a restaurant near my parents' house that had finally closed after 30 years. Nothing important. All of it easy. That evening I opened the document. The handoff manual. Every task, every contact, every account login, every note I had written in the weeks before the move, the thing neither of them had acknowledged receiving. I read through it slowly, start to finish. Almost none of it had been needed. I didn't delete it. I moved it to a folder I didn't open often and closed the laptop. Outside the window, the coastline was doing what it did in the evenings, the light going flat and then gold and then gone. The phone on the counter was quiet. I didn't look at it. I didn't wait for it. The silence was just silence. I'm over it where silence ends. Subscribe if any of this sounds familiar.